Okay, great. Well, it looks like folks have logged in, and we've got folks here live at the expo floor. So I want to say welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today for today's SRO seminar, 5 Security Threats SMB Should Not Ignore. For those of you watching the live simulcast, you'll notice in the upper or towards the right-hand side of your screen, there are a bunch of icons. One of them opens a questions window. If at any point in time during the presentation portion you have got a question to ask, go ahead, type it there. It's the best way. It lets us track the questions. We know who was asked us. We'll make sure we get those questions answered before we finish up here this afternoon. So I want to thank folks for joining us. This session's also being recorded, so sometime within the next day or so, once we have a chance to process the recording, we will post it, make it available if you want to go back and see another part or share it with a colleague who you think might find it interesting. So that said, I want to welcome everyone. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy day to join us here. Hopefully the audio is good for everyone as we are doing this live from an expo floor. So we talk about 5 security threats that SMB should not ignore. I'm not going to focus on some of the common ones that people think about as far as having a firewall and having a router and things of that nature. We're going to look at some of the ones that tend to get overlooked or can get overlooked in the process of small and mid-sized businesses setting up their computing environment, particularly if you're starting to use or already using cloud computing services. So first up, phishing attacks. I know we've heard a lot about phishing attacks in the media lately. It appears actually that the recent celebrity picture breach with iCloud was actually a series of phishing attacks where the celebrities or people who worked for them on their accounts took what appeared to be legitimate emails or legitimate websites and provided enough information that the hackers could then break in and guess these users' iCloud account. So the insidious thing about phishing accounts is that they're going after people using real social engineering techniques and understanding of how people work and how their emotions work. And you provide a legitimate thing, you can actually get someone to inadvertently give up their username, their password, or download something that installs and tracks. And you think, gee, I'm a small, mid-sized business. What intellectual property, what information could I have on my systems that would warrant someone doing a phishing attack? Well, a couple of things. One, attackers know that small businesses work with other small businesses and consumers, so there's a reasonable expectation that you might have credit card information. And maybe because you're a small business, it wouldn't be as secure if you were a larger company, although that usually and shouldn't really even be the case. Other issues you have, however, is simply the personal information that you have about your employees. And oftentimes, phishing attacks and other hackers going after small, mid-sized business aren't going at you as a company, per se. They're going for the information you have and to basically steal the identity of your employees and work from there, because that's where they get access to fake credit cards, that's where they get access to financial accounts, or can even do further accounts and further damage to individuals who work for you. So there's 2 levels of attacks in SMB. So granted, you're not the government contractor working on a top secret project where people might want to get in and steal that information, but you actually still have a lot of information that's very valuable on the black market to hackers. And phishing attacks is probably one of the most prevalent ways that attackers are going on. And so the way to avoid this threat is actually one of education. You have to let people understand what a phishing attack is. You should talk to your employees about what might be a suspicious email and things to look for. The other way to prevent phishing attacks is to have a really good spam and virus protection system in place that can identify emails that are likely doing phishing and block those from even hitting the inboxes of your users. And there's some other techniques that we can talk about a little bit later on as well. Because the next site is closely related to phishing attacks, and that's website malware. And what do I mean by malware? So malware is any code that can do you harm. And believe it or not, it's not just, hey, here's a deal you can't refuse, click on a site that we've created that's corrupt and is going to pollute your computer or give you a virus. A lot of website malware has actually been inserted through exploits and coding flaws on very legitimate websites. There was a point in time where the CNN.com site was infected with malware, and people going to certain pages were actually running into problems with software being installed, down on their computers. They went and they did downloads. And so it's an issue you've got to worry about on website malware. And so a couple of ways to present that. One, Talk to your people about being responsible web surfers, only going to sites they know, avoiding short URLs, things of that nature. The other thing that we recommend is web filtering services. So web filtering service not only keeps a database of websites that are known to contain malware or frequently contain malware, but will also actually analyze the traffic from websites in real time and look for patterns that can indicate that malware is present, such as a file being pushed down to the browser that the user hasn't explicitly asked for, or even code patterns within those files that are coming down that could indicate a problem. Okay, and the fascinating thing right now is, we all think about computer viruses coming from the disk drive someone sent me or an email attachment. The reality is right now you are 20 times more likely to get a virus or malware from an infected website than you are from any other source. And so it's a huge issue, and one that small, mid-sized businesses shouldn't overlook as part of their ecosystem. The third security threat that faces most SMBs, particularly as you move into the cloud, are file sharing violations. Now, we know that when you have your in-house file server, you have a good sense it's secure. Maybe you have remote access into your environment, maybe you don't. If you do, it's a bigger issue. But even within the company, is there information from the HR department that's inadvertently shared with all of the employees by mistake? Now, you take that model and you put your files in the cloud, your risk of disclosure isn't greater, but the potential is there for it to be greater. And so you need to make sure that information that should be protected, files that should be protected, are protected, not just from public exposure or external exposure, but from overexposure within your organization as well. Even if you're a 10-person company, there's probably some information that should only be for eyes of 1 or 2 people. You want to keep it that way. And so when we look at building a cloud-based ecosystem, even when we're using Google Drive as the file service, we look at tools that manage those file sharing rules, where you can set up business rules, where you can manage who can see what based on the content of those documents, and not only educate your employees to understand what those are, but then have a system that will scan your content and identify potential violations or anything that might be wrong or overextension of permissions along those lines. Okay, and so this is the third security threat. And by the way, this is not an uncommon way for data to be breached. We've had a number of companies that have inadvertently had file sharing violations. So where do they come from? They come from user error, but believe it or not, they come from another source that we'll talk about in a few moments, which is third-party applications. And here we get back into the impact of human behavior on the whole process of security threats for small and mid-sized businesses. And particularly as you move into the cloud and you're providing access to your internal environment from mobile devices like tablets and smartphones, one of the issues you have to worry about is what's happening with third-party applications. And why is that? Because if I go and I download something from the Apple Store, an application, and put on my iPhone, and it recognizes that I have Google Drive in place, or that I use Gmail as my primary email client, there's a good chance at some point during the install process it's going to say, gee, we want to access your Gmail account. And like most people, even I, who is security conscious, don't always read the level of access requested by the application. And the thing is, it's easier for an application to request universal access than it is for them to make all the specific requests that they actually need. So you can have an application over-request access to information in your account, even if it's not going to use it, and then a programming error, excuse me, or a security flaw in that application can lead to a breach. In fact, we're aware of an application, it's a project management tool, that had the ability to access files on people's Google Drive through their Android and iPhone devices that inadvertently would set all of the users' documents to public sharing permissions on a weekly basis when it went to scan and do its database. It wasn't intentional, it wasn't malicious, but it created a huge security threat. And because most people, when they get those pop-ups that say yes or grant or allow, because they want the application, they click yes, that's where the risk comes into play. Is that it's not, even if it's not intentional, it's one of lack of awareness. So to solve the third-party application process, we recommend tools that can scan your environment, whatever cloud environment you're working in, identify applications that are accessing that environment through the APIs or through consolidated login, and let you know if those applications are trustworthy, what level of permissions they're asking, and whether or not they generally pose a risk. If they do pose a risk, you may want to revoke those permissions and block them. Additionally, if there are certain applications you want your people to be using from a third party, you may actually pre-approve those so when people install them, they don't have problems. And so you can give yourself a lot of control over your environment and protect a lot of information, a lot of security leaks. And finally, a good security threat that most businesses overlook is disclosure by email. And here we really get into almost a regulatory type of environment and requirement. And that, as a small business, there's a good chance, for example, that you may accept credit cards. And even though you do your e-commerce through a closed system or through a service provider that's PCI compliant and is secure, there are probably times when your employees may, answering a customer service request or providing information back to a vendor or customer, may actually put information that should be private and secure into email and send it off, or they might send off an attachment that has that information in it without thinking about it. Another type of common disclosure gets in, for example, when HR people are starting emailing insurance carriers and benefits administrators, the risk of accidental disclosure of personal health information is there as well. And so even if you're not a doctor's office, even if you're not, a storefront business that does a lot with retail and credit cards, if you have that information in your environment, disclosure by email is a concern. We also see, in many cases, where employees have disclosed proprietary information for the company accidentally through email, where they're providing information to a client about a process or on a project for a customer that should have been confidential, and they've inadvertently shared it with someone else. And so, looking at that, there's a type of issue. You definitely need a system in place that can optionally, at the user's request, or automatically, based on a scan of the content, encrypt the information or ensure it's secure. And that can happen at a couple of levels. So, for example, when we deploy Google Apps for business or government or for nonprofits, we always turn on policy-based TLS. That's server-to-server encryption if both the sender and the receiver have TLS enabled, then all the email between the sender and receiver are encrypted. Beyond that, you can do individual email encryption and have that go. So I just got a comment that says, hey, we lost the sound feed. I'm wondering if it has returned yet. So I'm just going to send a text. Okay, yeah, so the sound is back. Hopefully you didn't miss too much. I've been talking about disclosure by email. So disclosure by email is either the content of the email message itself or the attachment has information that shouldn't be shared. And even small businesses that aren't centered around protected information, like a doctor's office would be, or like a retail store would be that has credit card information, your business may handle that type of information about your own employees or for a limited number of transactions. And the risk of having someone put that in clear text in an email or to email a document to someone that might contain personally identifiable information or account information is a risk. And so to address disclosure by email, we recommend tools that enable encryption. Hopefully, the capital of the sound was out. TLS encryption is transport layer service encryption. It's server-to-server encryption that can be automated behind the scenes if both the sender and the receiver have it turned on. It's something that we turn on, that says, hey, if we can send it encrypted, send it encrypted. If anyone wants to send us encrypted messages, receive them as encrypted, decrypt them internally. Additionally, there are services that provide message-level encryption. This is where the sender can actually choose to have a message encrypted as well as the attachment, and where the user will have to, the recipient will have to verify their identity before they can read the message. As part of that, you could also have heuristics in place that automatically scan outgoing messages for potential proprietary or sensitive information and automatically encrypt them as well. And so as we look at these 5 security risks, Well, they're often overlooked. None of them individually is particularly difficult, nor are they particularly expensive to solve. Things such as good spam and virus protection, web filtering, tools for scanning your cloud-based file services for sharing violations and permissions violations, or even giving you the ability to selectively encrypt files that you're storing in the cloud, checking your environment, and we do this all the time with the Google Apps environment for third-party applications, that individuals may be given access to your environment through their mobile phones, for example, and then email, core, infrastructure encryption, or individual email encryption. Now, not all of these tools and techniques are going to be appropriate for every business, but every business should at least assess these 5 risks and decide if a couple of dollars a month per user now can prevent huge aggravations down the road and later. And so on that note, I've sort of covered my 5 security threats that SMBs should not ignore, and I'd like to open it up for any questions or ask if anyone wants to see anything related to these services. So at this point, if you have any questions, feel free to jump into the questions window and ask away. Okay, and someone here live has a question. And so the question is, what does the cost structure look like for message level encryption? So for message level encryption, if you're a small business with fewer than 10 users, you're probably looking, and not every user may need the message level encryption, but you're probably looking at about $6 per month or about $70 per year per user for that service. Now granted, if you're using Google Apps, that's on top of the $50 per user license. We offer, for when we talk about things such as third-party application scanning and file system scanning in the Google Apps environment, we partner with the firm CloudLock. There, for $2 per user per month or $24 per user per year, we can not only scan your content and fix permissions that might be inappropriate, we can track Google Plus submissions for sensitive information and audit, monitor, and manage those third-party applications and give you the ability to selectively encrypt files that you store up in Drive for additional protection and one-to-one protection. So there are a number of options there. So I wonder if there are other questions that folks might have. So anyone here in the audience have a question? Okay, so for the folks online, it looks like they're thinking about it. But anyone on the simulcast, if you open the questions window, ask away now. Okay, so Dave here has a question which is, how do I know if even the cloud is right for my business? The best way to know if the cloud and these types of services are right for your business is to sit down and run the scenarios. It's one thing to look at the technology and what's out there, and yes, I'm an evangelist. I believe that the cloud is great and will add benefit to most businesses most of the time. But it's really, how does your business operate, and will it benefit the business not just financially but from a productivity or a profitability standpoint? And the best way to sit down is to run the scenarios, run the use cases, and run the numbers and see how it all fits together. Okay, we have a question saying, is there going to be a recording of this available? Yes, there will. The session is being recorded. Because you registered and attended, and even for folks who registered and couldn't attend, we'll get a link to the recording out to you. If not late tonight, should be in your inbox by about 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So you will have that as well. Okay, so that said, it doesn't look like there are any questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. Oh, we're reconnecting to the audio. Okay, so it looks like our audio came back again. I apologize for the inconvenience there. One of the challenges when you're in an expo center is the nature of the internet connection we have access to. And so I apologize for the loss of audio. It's gone. So we had a couple of questions from the folks who have joined us on the simulcast online. The folks here live don't have any other questions. So at this point, if folks don't have any additional questions, I'll wrap this up, let you get on with your day. I do want to thank you for joining us here this afternoon. If you have additional questions or want to talk about your situation in particular, my contact information, our contact information is on the screen as well, sales@cumulusglobal.com or afalcon@cumulusglobal.com. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer any questions and assist you in any way we can. So again, thank you for joining us here today. Have a great day.